A black man named Gary Ackland was at the Emerald Clubhouse of Sound Mental Health when I first came to Seattle in 2001, 2002, and joined them at the advice of a group calling themselves ADWAS, which was for abused deaf people. And I told him at the meeting where I was applying to be admitted to the clubhouse about the incident of reckless driving at Kelly's school and mentioned John Schulman as the ringleader of the gang. And I told him a little bit about, the struggle I had growing up, how I went deaf. And he looked at me and said, "We're not going to let them hurt you anymore." And that's the type of man he was. He couldn't stop them from hurting me, but he really meant it when he said he was going to try. And I didn't have the papers of Gail Burston at the time. I had to leave Pittsburgh homeless with nothing. Was homeless for a couple of years, dragged through the streets. I had pre-cancers on my face that had to be removed. But I sent to Carnegie Mellon for the microfilm. And about 2 years later, they did finally send it to Seattle Public Library, and I was able to show Gary what I was talking about concerning the script and the representation of the death of Lenin from 1974. But by then, his colleagues had ransacked my profile and put together their double bind, namely that it didn't say what Pitt denied it said, and that they believed that their opportunity knocked by trying to legitimize and leverage the claim that I could have saved him. This was their overriding goal towards which they murdered me by poison crimes. I mean, I'm losing my ability to um, be creative and represent this testimony, and Parkinson's will undo my talents sooner rather than later because of the hemorrhage of evil that was visited on me by the people who pulled this stunt in Pittsburgh and Seattle, which primarily is a Duquesne University crowd. Well, be that as it may, one of the letters that really haunted me that I was ever able to shake, and of course they never recognized or admitted it because it um, contrary evidence to their wangle was a letter from Gail Burston that said, um, "This woman gets bad headaches, but she behaves better." And it was clearly in the context of gossip catcalls from brutal Israeli traffickers. The girl was 12 years old and she's using the language and perceptions of brutal Israeli traffickers. She gets bad headaches, but she behaves better. And these slow eyed liars represented me as self inflicting my wounds. And there's evidence that Rachel McCloskey and Karen Sasimoto got together with Winslow Isaac Simon and agreed to expose me to Roundup to cause Parkinson's. There's evidence that that may be what happened. It's speculation, but there is evidence for it in the clubhouse newsletters because Karen Sasimoto was a one night stand on the West Coast. In fact, their hybrid decordery made a pitch about my beloved father's very well loved long worn sweater being up for sale. I mean, she didn't resist my advances. The advances were actually as much hers. She asked me if I wanted to sleep in a room with her. And since I don't speak, my language is non vocal. The crepe pimp comes over and says, "You didn't say goodbye to her." And they made it through the talking point, through their misrepresentation of everything that they were actually pulling. I mean, Raleigh was sort of intimate abuser. He contracted me to pay him to build a chair for me because the one he built was so comfortable, and he made it just slightly differently so that it was uncomfortable as hell. And I'm sure that he knew what he was doing. So visually you could barely tell the difference. So this is the sort of mindset that existed at Carnegie Mellon towards me and Duquesne University in Seattle. So where does this lead? Well, when I was at Carnegie Mellon in a punk rock band called Citizens of Rust, I became something of a skinhead rocker again, a punk rocker against Reagan. The songs were like "Wallet Packed with Small Change," just another big time loser in the paper chase, looking out for yourself, yeah. And some of them pay ransom to the crown. Some of them are martyrs when they frown. Tell me who is worse, my friend, or you? Some come pirouetting to the scene, getting there on rice and gasoline. Tell me who is worse, my friend, or you? Is it Russia? Is it Motley Crue? And yeah, the guitarists Miguel and Ben were. Tell me who is worse, my friend, or you? Is it Russia? Is it Motley Crue? And when I played it for, she was living with Paulie. And when I played it for Gail Burst, she looked at Paulie and said, "Oh well," because she must have known Tammy Simon, the lesbian from Magical Religion that he loved with the Dalai Lama, who Leslie Katz invited. So the sex change of Kyra in her letters, he is a she, was a redneck pitch. Lou Reed was playing a joke on that generation for George Bush. He was in on this redneck sex change operation. I'm not putting down the tyrannic um, situation, I'm sure, but they had me um, thinking I was in tune with my anima. And when I looked up some of the unusual dimensions that come up in philosophical, popular philosophical, and theosophical organizations, I came across the name Rene Guenon. And after reading a little bit about it, it was the first time in my life I'd ever seen it. I did a search. I seemed to had a hunch. I did a search of Syed Hossein Nasser, one of my professors at Temple University, and Alexander Dugan. And the first page generated was the second time in my life I'd ever seen the name Rene Guenon. And you can do a search of Guenon and the Dalai Lama. It's productive. So they were the storyline about being hypnotized to be a submissive, whining queer bait had a Bryn Mawr dimension, the laughing stock. Ultimately, Penis Gabriel's goal was to sacrifice me by saying I wasn't man. I wasn't a man. So because I didn't date rape Leslie Couch, which was the letter I wrote, protesting her innuendos about that fact. And they were impinging pornographic dialogue on around the circus saying you blew it and all this stuff. I even coined a phrase, the mysterious Chinese Gordon, and it turned out, strangely enough, Charlton Heston played somebody known as the mysterious Chinese Gordon. Did I know that? No way. But Wen was impinging over Dubs, and Gordon was being accused of date rape at Harvard and being vindicated by the women in the school. And Martin Alderman was going, "Don't stop, don't stop." And he was a friend of both Leslie Katz. He introduced me to Tammy Simon, this lesbian from Magical Religion who knew the Dalai Lama. And Martin Alderman grew up with Leslie Katz and Tom Gordon. They used to perch outside Cyril Weck, the famous Kennedy assassin. I had 1966, I Love Cyril Saran on my door, on the door of the parking garage out back. So then this is a Licky Chops quorum. The Licky Chops are going to cash in on this. So Seattle's royal goal was to put me to death. The idea that I could have saved John Lennon, which is suspicious on every level. Now, when you get into Rene Guenon, you start finding that what they, some of my work is telltale for how productive it is. Like, for example, the fact that I was able to identify the Italian futurists and show that D.W. Griffith was introduced to Mussolini by a man named Luigi Freddi, who is a cameraman, shows that the Italian futurists and Cubans were party to the Babylonian grand spectacle of the race crowd in Nazi and Hollywood. And in fact, I was able to identify blind senders after hours and hours of research with professional librarians from the index of a cubism book because I knew somebody must be doing what he did. There had to be someone there who was in, and he was in cinema literature that mirrored cinema. He was much more telltale than I ever expected to find. But it took hours and hours, but I was perseverant and never gave up. And you have these semiotics of the super story of rescuing Hitler and two versions Pussyball that I just never gave up. I found the evidence for it. So the fact that by pursuing the idea that they're using a hybrid technique to play the theme of the man who framed himself for Hitler Reagan, um, makes you wonder, the pornographic genociders are theologians, right? I mean, you look at the critique of theosophy, that one of them surfaces in it. So whether they actually believe, I mean, some sort of a stretch to believe that George Bush believes that looking at pornographic is a fourth dimensional abortion, but Hollywood and the Chernuka film industry of Russia are warmongers. And what you're seeing, I think, is clear evidence that they impinged the persona of their rivalry. Like they got together and huddled. So look, everybody believes Russia and America hates each other. So we keep playing that thing. So in a control situation of parameters of battlefields, while secretly we build our theosophical empire together. And they had a Swami of the idea that, the ghost in the machine calls are called the situation with man, the human condition. So you have the theosophical elements of pornography being demonized, and the idea of the soul of the television eidetics being, and they build an artificial intelligence system about what's going on that deceives everybody. They play one side against the other for deception while laughing behind everyone's backs is what seems to be the reality of this situation with these people. So when you look at the situation with the Swami Nostra that said they could read people's finer feelings about losing Lenin and dying prematurely of the AIDS attack, so they'll detonate symbolic gestures to make people, as Clint Eastwood put it, get them over the hurdle. Was this logo therapy, logo rapine that went on in the 80s that they were calling Operation Medicine Man. But the Swami is a theologian. And although the theme theory is clearly actionable, I mean, they are getting away with hybrid school attacks, active shooters on while pimping the woke versus the Trumpy Tune line. The Trumpy Tune Putinies are actually believed that is question. I mean, it's clear that Bush was working with Tammy Simon because he liberated T. Simon Ferrasani to come to Washington, D.C., where his agent from Carnegie Mellon University who was in touch with John Stockwell, took me and introduced me to Hypatia feminist philosophy, Society of Military Engineers. Bush knew T. Simon was an agent for the Delhi Lama and all this. But although people said when he was out on his motorboat in Maine that he was God's emissary on earth, I find it hard to believe any of these stupid people actually believe that. I mean, but the leer of the Licky Chops parochial and the make for um, pass the collection hat. You know, the church says you better pay the whore. The church will come knocking at your door. Amen. You know, that pressure, like, what did they do to little Jimmy Curry? What she says in her letter. He gets bad headaches, but he behaves better. I mean, they put him up to it. And they so damaged from the bad headaches that there was no way that I could have anticipated the 12-year-old girl was representing the world's theologists in the second coming of Adolf Hitler. You know, that she was his Jewish attorney for the situation. It's a little bit too Pittsburgh for my grasp at that age and that condition.